All right. Hello, class. Can you guys see that word endocrine? Hope so. What does endo mean? You guys know what endo means? Oh, there we go. There's my pen right there.
Internal.
Yeah. Endo inside, exo outside. Now we're left with the word crine. What does crine mean? It's okay if you don't know. It means secrete. So something that secretes inside. The endocrine system is it's kind of a continuation of neurology, of the nervous system, because they work together. So you think about something like adrenaline, right? Epinephrine. Why does epinephrine get released? It's because you see something or you hear something, and that's all nerves, right? Your eyes, your ears. That's the nervous system talking to a certain part of your body, and that certain part of your body is going to talk to another part of your body, and it's going to make it release chemicals. Right? So there's two things going on when your fight or flight is going on. So let's say like you see a snake and you want to run away from the snake. We got two things going on. The first is your nervous system. Right? So if I see a snake right here, I'm out the door. That's not chemicals. That's not my adrenaline. My adrenaline is once I get in the hallway. But for that first few seconds, that's just my nervous system. Right? Nerves go into my brain, I process it down to my legs to make my muscles move, and I'm gone, right? But nobody stops outside of the door, and it's like, people like keep going, right? So that's what I need the adrenaline for. I need to keep going, right? I gotta start getting a lot of blood to my legs. I gotta make my heart pump fast to get lots of blood to my legs, and I gotta start getting energy to my leg muscles. That's chemicals, and that would be like epinephrine. So that's your adrenaline. So they work together. It's just that one, in the case of here, your nervous system is lasting like really quick and going for just a few seconds. The endocrine part is going to last for a longer time, but it takes it takes a few seconds for it to work. Right? It's not instantaneous. I don't know why I keep doing this with my hands. Not even Italian. So another thing that the endocrine system does is it keeps everything in balance. Right? So I mentioned diabetes. Obviously, what's the hormone that keeps your blood sugar down? What's that common hormone called? No one wants to unmute. I know. Okay, whatever. Insulin, you know that. So yeah, insulin lowers your blood sugar. There's another hormone called glucagon, which we'll talk about not today. But those two hormones work together to keep our blood sugar balanced. We don't want it going too high. We don't want it going too low. We want to keep our body in homeostasis. Your body's always trying to achieve homeostasis, to keep this balance, right? And this is no better exemplified than in our discussion of the endocrine system, because that's what hormones do. They try to keep everything balanced. So the chemicals that are being released around your body, but these chemicals are being controlled by the brain. And there's a couple parts of the brain that we're going to talk about in particular, and one is the hypothalamus. That is like that's like the master gland of the endocrine system. The hypothalamus is receiving input from different places in your body. And based on that input, it's sending out signals. So what's going on with your metabolism? Is it too high? Is it too low? Your hypothalamus is receiving that information. And if it's too high or if it's too low, it's going to communicate with like another gland that we'll talk about a lot, called the pituitary gland. That's in your brain. It's right next to the hypothalamus. It sits like right underneath it. It's in the diencephalon area, I believe. So you have the hypothalamus, which is communicating with the pituitary gland. So hypothalamus receives signals from around the body, and whenever something's wrong, the hypothalamus gets a signal, and when something's wrong, it tells the pituitary gland, hey, pituitary gland, some of your people aren't doing their job. Go tell them to take care of it. Now the pituitary gland is going to send chemicals out to a bunch of other glands that we're going to discuss. And just to give you some examples, adrenal, thyroid, I don't know, testes. So there's other glands we're going to study too, but the big players are the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So that's kind of like a big overview of, or generalized overview of the endocrine system. But how do these hormones work? Like how are they able to do their job? For example, if you think about a hormone that interacts or that has to do with the testes, we would think like testosterone, right? Okay, but why doesn't testosterone go to your eyeballs and make hair grow in your eyeballs? You know, why doesn't estrogen go to your pinky toe and affect that in some way? Why doesn't prolactin, which makes you lactate, you know, why doesn't that go to your earlobes? Right? It only goes to one place. Well, it's not that that hormone is only going to one place. It's that it's all about the receptors. So only the mammary glands have the receptors for prolactin or whatever hormone is. Right? It's not important that you know what the hormones are right now. Just the idea that you have receptors that are just for that. Right? So really, the answer to a lot of this is about receptors, and receptors are proteins on the cell, right? So you have just going to draw some cell. There's a cell, and I'm going to make like a little green. I'm going to make like a little nucleus here. I don't know why, because I just got to make cells like that. And then in green, here's my receptor. I'm going to make it look like that. I made it kind of a big receptor. I don't even know if you guys can see it. And then you got all this stuff floating in your blood, right? And these things floating around in your blood, they look like this and like that. And some of them look like that, right? So the receptor is designed to take in the specific substance, the specific hormone, for example. So these are all hormones floating around in your blood. Only these cells have this receptor to take that particular hormone. Only your thyroid gland, which is up here, it's the only one set up to take in iodine. All right, so you have iodine flowing through your body, but that iodine is only going to your thyroid gland because it's the only one with the receptor. So it's all about receptors. And you'll see a lot of medicine either makes more receptors or maybe they block receptors, right? Like Novocaine blocks pain receptors, right? So some receptors are for pain, some are for chemicals. There's receptors for, you have these receptors all around your cell, and they have all these different jobs. Some receptors are for hormones. So let's say that, like, we have a bunch of, let's say we don't have a lot of hormone, right? So this cell wants to bring in triangles, but there's no triangles out in this area. It's all circles, right? There's like a couple of triangles, right? So it's kind of hard. How could your body adapt to try to get as much of these triangles as it can? Like if there's not a lot of hormone around, what can the cell do with the, I'm going to give you the answer, with the receptors? It can make more of them. So I'll make a bunch more receptors, and that'll make me better at getting the little bit that's out there, right? There's not as much hormone in your body, so I'm going to increase the receptors so that I can get the little bit that's in there. And the opposite's true. So that, what I just described, we call that upregulation. Yes, you have to know that. Upregulation meaning you increase the number of receptors. Makes the cell more sensitive, right? And then the opposite would be downregulation. Decreased receptors. I just put an arrow because I'm being lazy. So if I had like lots of triangles, well, I don't need them all. So I'll decrease the receptors that I have to make the cell less sensitive. So it's all about receptors. That's why that's why your mammary glands go through lactation and not some other part of your body. The answer is receptors. Those mammary glands can make more receptors or less, depending on what it is that you want to do. So that's the idea behind upregulation and downregulation. All right, so sometimes you find a case where hormones, well, many times, hormones interact with each other. So if we're to take prolactin, for an example, that's what makes you lactate, that's not the only hormone involved. It's not just one hormone, because that's making milk. That takes a lot of energy. You want to make sure that you actually have a need for that, right? Your body doesn't want to just make it for no reason. So with the case of prolactin, there's actually lots of other hormones that are involved. And so prolactin's not going to work just by itself. It needs to take the permission of like another hormone. So we call that a permissive effect. So permissive effect, one hormone takes the permission of another. It's kind of your body's way of checking itself, so you don't just do things without a good reason. You don't want any false starts, right? So your body will have another hormone that needs to be present before another hormone can work. Prolactin also needs oxytocin, for example. I know don't worry about the hormones if you haven't heard of them. The point is sometimes hormones need permission of another one. But sometimes the hormones can work together. And when they work together, we call that a synergistic effect. So hormones will work together for a similar purpose. If somebody's growing, you're going to use growth hormone, right? Growth hormone for growing. But that's not the only hormone that's involved in somebody growing. There's hormones from your thyroid gland that control your metabolism. Those are going to increase also. Because yes, you need growth hormone to grow, but you got to raise your metabolism too, right? You can't just have growth hormone and like not eat, for example, right? You got to eat food to grow. So you're going to have hormones from your thyroid that are going to make you hungry and increase your metabolism. They're working together for a common purpose. So they're synergistic hormones. We use that example of insulin and glucagon. One raises blood sugar, one lowers blood sugar. So in that case, they're not, you could say that they're working together to keep blood sugars level, but the way I'm saying it here is that they're not working together because they're doing opposite. One raises, one lowers. It's like they're working against each other, right? So, and they're antagonizing each other. So we got 3 different types of hormone interactions. Sometimes they work together, synergy. Sometimes they work against each other, antagonistic. There is a word called, what's the word? Agonist. It sounds similar to this, but it does not mean, it means the opposite. So don't get that confused. Don't get confused an agonist with antagonistic. Antagonize. Work against each other, work with each other. One hormone needs permission from another hormone. Right, so those are 3 types of interactions. Questions so far? Anything? I'm going to erase this. I'm going to erase all of this. So the up receptors, the down receptors, please know that up regulation, down regulation, and hormone interactions, please know those 2 things, because those are things that I sometimes ask questions about. Small questions, but okay. Hormones there's 2 types of hormones in your body. Some of them mix with water and some of them mix with lipids. So there's water-soluble hormones and there's lipid-soluble hormones. How are we with time? I don't need you.
10:13.
Halfway through. We're halfway through. So some hormones are water soluble. Those are protein hormones. In the lecture, I'll list different kinds, but they're all proteins. They're called like amines or whatever they're called. They're proteins for the most part. And most hormones are proteins, but some of them are lipid soluble, and a lot of them are made from cholesterol, just like or you get from an egg yolk, right? So to give you an example, the steroids. Including your sex hormones. So by steroids, I mean steroids. Like we think of steroids, hydrocortisone, cortisol, that type of thing. Right? Our body makes those. They're lipid soluble. And then sex hormones, I'm talking about, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and even vitamin D, which is called, well, who cares, right? Those are all lipid soluble. And then your thyroid hormones are lipid soluble, which we'll get to later. So these are lipid soluble steroids, and your things like testosterone and stuff, we call them like steroids. But they're all cholesterol. It's all cholesterol based. Your body uses cholesterol to make these things. And then the thyroid hormones, which we'll talk about both of them. Everything else, for example, epinephrine, insulin, right? It goes up. Whatever else is there, it goes up here. But you don't have to memorize that. That's just an FYI. But I do want you to know that some hormones are water soluble and some hormones are lipid soluble, because it means something. Because if a hormone is water soluble, it can be in the bloodstream without much problem, right? Because your blood is water. Your blood is water soluble. So water soluble hormone, water soluble blood, fine. Lipid soluble hormone, right? Water and lipids don't mix. So these hormones can't just go into the blood. What they do is they hop on top of a protein. There's usually a transport protein. So they get on top of a protein and they ride that through the bloodstream. They can't just go in the bloodstream. So there's a difference on how they move around in your blood. And more importantly, there's a difference on how they affect the cell. So this is kind of like the last thing I want to talk about today. It's going to take me like 10 minutes. Yeah.
Quick question. Okay, so you said that water soluble with protein, but the lipid goes in on a protein?
The lipid's made from cholesterol. Oh, it had when the lipid soluble hormone, because it's made from like oil, right? Not oil, but fat, whatever. When it moves through the blood, you can't put fat in the blood. It just doesn't mix. So it jumps on top of a protein. Not a protein hormone, just a protein.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, by the way, I'm going to be using the word protein all the time. And proteins are it's one of those 4 big molecules in our body. And proteins are really, like my hair is protein, right? My muscle, protein. But hemoglobin is protein. Antibodies are protein. We're trying to come up with a vaccine. What's that vaccine going to be made of? Proteins, right? So protein's just it's a extremely diverse thing. Proteins are extremely diverse. So yes, in one case I talked about water-soluble hormones. They're proteins. They're made from proteins. These hormones that go through the blood, they jump on other proteins, but they jump on proteins to ride through the blood. The receptors that I was writing earlier, those are proteins, right? So proteins are extremely diverse. They have so many different functions and shapes, but we tend to think in our head proteins are like, meat and muscle, and that's true, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So you'll hear the word protein even when you're out of this class and you're going into your field. Protein, 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 right? So what do these hormones do? They change the cell behavior. That's what hormones do. When a hormone gets to its destination, its target cell, so we call it a target cell, when hormones get to their target cell, they change the way the cell behaves. That's the ultimate goal. I'm just making sure you guys are. So they make the cell do something that it used to not do, or it makes the cell stop doing something that it used to do. Right? So stop doing something or start doing something. That's what hormones do. That's what they do to cells. So that's the ultimate goal. You want to change cell behavior. It used to grow hair, we wanted to stop growing hair. Or it doesn't grow hair, we wanted to start growing hair. That's it, that's what hormones do. So how they do it is different depending on what kind it is. Water-soluble hormones change the cell's behavior one way, and lipid-soluble does it a different way. I'm going to start with the lipid-soluble because that's actually easier. Lipid-soluble hormones, they can go right into the cell because the membrane of our cells are made from lipids, phospholipid bilayer, if you remember. So our cell membranes are made from phospholipids. So the wall around the cell made from lipids. There's my cell. There's my nucleus. And color it in. There's the wall. That's made from lipids. So the hormone's got no problem getting in. It just enters right into the cell, and it's going to go right to the nucleus. So that's what water-soluble hormones do. They go in the cell, they go to the nucleus, and they start flipping genes on and off. We refer to this as altering genetic expression. That says expression. The other video I made might have some more steps to it, right? But that's essentially what it does. It goes into the cell, it goes to the nucleus, it starts turning genes on and off. That changes the behavior of the cell. Because when you turn a gene on or off in the nucleus, that means you're going to make like new types of proteins or stop making proteins. Proteins make, I know I'm back on proteins again. That makes like you. Are you going to have diabetes or not? Depends on certain proteins. Are you tall or like me short? That depends on certain proteins. So, and the proteins, whatever proteins you have, do you have curly hair or straight hair? That depends on proteins. What do the proteins depend on? Your genes in your DNA. So a hormone can flip these genes on and off. That makes you start doing different things. So that's what lipid-soluble hormones do. That's the easier one. I'm going to erase this one now. Water-soluble. Oh, I wanted to leave my cell off. Whatever. Water-soluble is different. The cell membrane is made from lipids, phospholipids. So the membrane of the cell is made from lipids. The hormone, probably a protein, it's water soluble. It mixes with water. So you can't take something that's water and get it through the cell. It won't enter the cell. Not without help. But in this case, put my cell back up. I gotta do the nucleus. And I gotta check the time. I've got it. We'll be out of here in 6 minutes. All right. Here's my hormone. I'm just putting an X. It cannot get through here. Water soluble, yeah, it goes right through. I mean, lipid soluble, it goes right through. Water soluble, no, it cannot get in. It never enters. So right here in blue, and I guess I'm going to make that blue thing go like here too. There's a receptor sitting on the outside of that cell. And this hormone is going to trigger that receptor. So the hormone doesn't go in the cell, it just goes up to it and triggers that receptor. And that starts a chain reaction. Pretty shitty chain reaction, but I gotta put it all down. So, one, hormone triggers receptor. Oh my God, I gotta spell. So it's like a chain reaction. The receptor is activating this, I put it as like a blue dot or whatever, blob. It's called the G protein. So the receptor triggers the gene protein. Another protein word, huh? I'm going to erase this. The receptor triggers the G protein, which is waiting right inside the cell. When that G protein gets triggered and activated, it activates this enzyme that's right close by called, there's a lot of new words here, adenylate cyclase. And I'm going to stop it for a second to talk about adenylate cyclase. Adenylate cyclase is an enzyme, and I know that it's an enzyme because it ends with ASE. So when I see ASE, I know it's an enzyme. Not all enzymes end with ASE, but if it ends with ASE, it's an enzyme. So I know it's an enzyme. What do enzymes do? Because you're going to hear about enzymes a lot. Enzymes speed up chemical reactions. So that's officially what they do. So if you have like a test, not with me, but if you have a test question like you're taking the HESI or something, enzymes speed up reactions. They're catalysts. But for us, really, enzymes make things happen. Because not only does the enzyme speed up a reaction, it speeds it up 1,000,000 times. So it's the difference of something taking 3 years and 3 seconds. Like that's the difference that an enzyme makes. All right, so your body doesn't have 3 years to wait for something to happen, for anything. You don't have 3 years to break down your food. You have enzymes. You only have minutes. You want to break it down quick. So you have enzymes. So technically speaking, enzymes speed up reactions. But practically speaking, enzymes make things happen. Without the enzyme, things don't happen. A lot of medicines inhibit enzymes because when you screw up an enzyme, you can stop your body from doing something. So anyway, this is an enzyme, adenylate cyclase. It was not active, and the G protein activated it. So the adenylate cyclase it makes something called cyclic AMP. I'm just going to put CAMP. I'm almost done with this. I got like maybe 2 more. So cyclic AMP, which I'm just calling it CAMP. Cyclic AMP, now this is all inside of the cell. Cyclic AMP, I know this sucks. I know I sucker punched you on day 1. We'll just get through it, power through it. It gets better, it gets easier. Not today, but cyclic AMP wow, activates, because I can't think of what it is, so I'm running activates. Activates not phosphodiesterase, it phosphorylates, oh shit, I can't think of what it does now. Protein kinases, I thought of it. I know this is like, what? So this activates another enzyme. It's all, you see how like one thing's activating the next thing, which activates the next thing? It's all messed up, right? It's really long. There's a reason for it. It activates this protein kinases. I'm on my last one here. So protein kinases, that ends with ASE. So I know it's an enzyme. So we're getting another enzyme activated here. Lastly, this last enzyme, protein kinase, I'm just writing it there. Protein kinases finally phosphorylate, and all that means is gives energy to. So protein kinases give energy to other enzymes. What are other enzymes? Depends. Are you growing hair? It's the enzyme that grows hair. Are you moving your muscle? It's the enzyme that causes you to move muscle. It's whatever it is. Whatever it is that your body's doing, that's what I mean by other enzymes. So the enzymes, whatever enzymes are going to be made at the end of this long process, that is what is going to change your cell's behavior. With the lipid-soluble hormones, we turn the DNA on and off. That changed the cell's, I went over, I know it. That changed the cell's behavior. Here, it's the other enzymes. By activating an enzyme, you can make a cell do something or not do something that it used to do. This is a pain in the ass, I know it. I know. You just gotta sit with it and write it out. Write it out. Once you got all the new words in your head and you've like memorized the process, then read about the process in your book. It'll hopefully make some sense and you like look at some pictures. All right. I know it's like not a good way to end our first class. It's not always like this. I'm telling you, it's like hard in the beginning. I have this it'll be in this video that I'm going to post. It's also in another video that's up there. It's in your book. I mean, there's different methods. So I do want you to know this. Yes, know this. And the lipid-soluble hormones. So we call that the mode of action. You know, how do they work? I want you to know how water-soluble hormones work and how lipid-soluble hormones work. So definitely learn this between now and Monday. If you want to read ahead a little bit in your book, I'm following the book. Right, so I'm going to start talking about the pituitary gland next class. I would read ahead if I were you. So I would spend, the key to this class is to spend a little bit of time every day. Spend a half hour, that's it. Don't feel like you have to know this today. Just study it today. Study it tomorrow. It's not going to all be in your head. You're going to learn this stuff and then go to sleep, wake up. You're going to forget most of it. That's normal. Like, don't get frustrated. You just got to keep working at it. Right? So, what activity do you learn in like one day anyway, right? You got to keep at it, and that's how you become good at it. So, all right, I'm going to leave it there. If you got any, I'm going to stop the recording, but if you have any questions, I'm going to stay on, so you guys can just jump on and ask questions, or you can leave, and I will see you guys on Monday. If you're, lab. If you're in lab, stay around for a few minutes. I'm going to go over the syllabus, and we're done for the day. If you're not in lab, you guys can check out. I think most of you are in lab.
A quick question.
Yeah.
You said that's how they work to do what? Phosphorylate or something?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You said that's how they work to do what? A phosphorylate?
This?
Nah, I'm gonna have to go back on the video. That's all.
Okay, sorry.
It's all good.
I wasn't getting the question. It's probably my fault. You can text me too later if you want. All right, let me go over lab. So I'm just going to show you the online thing we're doing for labs. So I'm going to go over to the. Hey, did you all write your name for the lecture? So let me stop this. Give me a second. Within 10 minutes, you're going to be done with me for the day.